So today we're talking about a pretty spectacular park that has 3 major roller coasters that all feature giant rock statues of animals that they're themed to.
So we're talking about that park. We're talking about 4 parks total. Orphan Yunnan Paradise is our animal rock statue park. Then we're also talking about 3 parks: Oriental Heritage and Fantawild. This is our second Oriental Heritage park of the trip, which I didn't really realize. Did you know that they're all different? Like, obviously all of the different Fantawild branches of parks are different, but even the Oriental Heritage parks are all totally different. Like, the 2 that we went to, really, aside from some ride roster similarities, really couldn't have been more different from each other. And I thought some of them, like ones that had maybe the same ride roster or the same coaster lineup, would be the same, or like ones that were built at around the same time, or like built on, new concept construction areas where they had lots of room. I just assumed that some of these would be identical, but none of them are. None of the parks are identical. I just kind of imagined that they were getting like designed with the same rides essentially, and then like stamped out Marriott's Great America style, but they're not. And even though they share a lot of the same rides, I think most, if not every Fantawild park has at least one ride that's unique to that park. And some of them are like totally unique rosters.
And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coast of Kings Radio. And today's episode is all about, like we just discussed. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so if I do not sound my usual self, I do apologize.
Still sound great.
Oh, thanks. So today we're talking about 3 major Chinese theme parks, and originally we were going to separate them into 2 different podcast episodes, but I think these kind of make sense to put together. So we're going to be talking about 2 parks in Xiamen, which is in the south of the country, not too far from Taiwan, actually. And then we're going to be talking about a park in Yunnan province. And we're going to dive right into the Xiamen parks first, which are part of the Fantawild chain. So a couple episodes ago, we talked about Fantawild and Ningbo, and they have 3 parks. The Bunny Bears little kids theme park that's indoor. And then they have a Oriental Heritage theme park, which is a certain like concept park, and then it also had a Glorious Orient concept park. Now the Xiamen resort is a little bit older, and so they also have 2 concept parks from the same chain, because this chain Fantawild is all about concepts that then they kind of develop, and then the parks are all different from each other a little bit, but they're like phases of concepts. So they create like a concept for a park, and then they just put them in different places. So the Fantawild in Xiamen has a Dreamland, which is an earlier concept. I think we kind of considered like a phase 2 concept, and an Oriental Heritage, which is like a phase 3 concept. So we're going to talk about that resort first. Alex, what was your initial thoughts on the resort?
Well, when we took the taxi there, I mean, I didn't know what to expect with the resort setup. The Ningbo setup was really nice and big and grand, but it was also like in the middle of nowhere. The Xiamen setup, like you said, is older, but it's also in a more central location, in a more like a desirable, developed location. And it's in an island, like a little man-made island with really just the parks, the 2 parks. Well, 3 if you count the water park. And then like a central like plaza with some shopping and stuff, and then the three gates.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, so when you arrive, what's kind of funny is you get dropped off. There's a giant parking structure. There's the Fantawild Hotel, and then in between there's a giant bridge. It looks kind of like a bridge that cars maybe used to drive on, but not anymore. And then you just walk over the giant bridge over the water, which this island is situated in the middle of a river that runs through Xiamen. And then when you get over the bridge, it's like a really beautifully, almost manicured giant circle. With one side is just a small building. It almost kind of reminded me of like Dutch Caribbean, kind of like Curaçao vibes.
Totally.
And then in the middle, on the other end of it, is a castle, which used to be the original entrance to the Dreamland Park, because that is the original park. And now that is the entrance to the water park, which is situated in between Dreamland and Oriental Heritage, which both of those have entrances to the water park from within their parks too. And then on the side you have Dreamland and Oriental Heritage. It's a very beautiful setup. Yeah, I quite like it.
It's a great setup. It's very clever. It's very space efficient. The way that it's like grown into itself over the years with like doing the second gate and then like wedging the water park in the middle, right in between the two parks. Like it's all very clever. It's all very, very space efficient. We got there nice and early. There were school kids, the usual. I think we were the only people
Of course,
there
there were school kids. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bunch of school kids and us. And their chaperones. And
which is funny because I feel like anytime we go to a Chinese park, April or May, there's always going to be like a horde of school kids. We've learned. But then we got lucky because the parks that earlier in the trip in Ningbo, we did on a weekend, I believe. So it was just like two groups of quite senior people and no real school kids. And then Colorful Yunnan Paradise, I think we did on a weekend too. So it was actually the only set of parks on this particular trip this year that we had to deal with the school kids thing.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of upside down. You would think that the weekdays, even with school kids, would be quieter than the weekends. But honestly, Saturdays and stuff at Chinese parks are quieter than weekdays when you have the school kids factored in. So we started, our priority really was to get all the coasters. Since this was our second Oriental Heritage Park, there wasn't as many of the dark rides that were as like high of a must-do list. Like when we did the Ningbo Resort, we were like really like chasing around, like really optimizing our time because we didn't want to run out of time before we rode everything that we wanted to ride.
Yeah, I think on paper, this resort was definitely not the one we're most excited for, which I think was nice because it kind of allowed us to be kind of pleasantly surprised. But you look at the lineup for this park, I mean, you've got a knockoff Mine Train, you have a real boomerang, and you have a real sky loop. But then, like, okay, that's for the Dreamland Park. It doesn't sound like it's all that. But again, I think I was pretty pleasantly surprised because, first of all,
I was very pleasantly surprised by Dreamland because up to this point, we were kind of spoiled by the nice, like, thematic nature of the two Ningbo parks, which were both newer parks than the two in Xiamen. And then once we were walking around in the Dreamland Park and like riding the coasters in the coaster corner, it reminded me a little bit of like the roller coaster corner of the Oriental Heritage Park in Ningbo. Almost like the Oriental Heritage Park in Ningbo was like doing two parks. It was like a little bit of the Oriental Heritage in Xiamen and also a little bit of the Dreamland in Xiamen.
Well, yeah, because like we discussed in the episode about Ningbo, is that because they built the Oriental Heritage Park as the first gate in Ningbo, they kind of had to throw some of the more traditional Dreamlandy stuff in there just to kind of have the more,
flesh it out.
I guess, like conventional staple attractions. But what was nice in Xiamen was that when they added Oriental Heritage, the second gate for them, they could really focus on all the Oriental Heritage particular things, which, the whole theme of that is just Chinese history, culture, mythology. And by focusing just on that in Xiamen, I mean, we'll get to this park in a second, but it was a pleasant surprise to see how cohesive that product was and made the Ningbo one feel not as great. But I mean, let's start.
The Ningbo one feel like disjointed.
In a way, yeah, because here it was really nice. Your Dreamland and your Oriental Heritage, and they're very separate. And Dreamland really is more of like a traditional looking theme park. Like I said, where you have your boomerang and your Mine Train and your, your Sky Loop. But in a way, it was kind of pleasant that they were so separated from each other thematically that they really did feel like two experiences. Yeah, so I guess we'll start with walking into Dreamland. So first of all, Xiamen is on the southern coast, on the South China Sea. So it is quite warm. It is quite hot. And for some reason, I hadn't really realized that until we were taking the train down from Ningbo, actually. And as we were, moving down for 5.5 hours in the bullet train, you could just see the landscape change into like palm trees, and it was very, very hot. It was very humid. It was definitely like, all right, this is. I understand because it's so close to Taiwan, which is where it's very hot. it was definitely very tropical. So in a way, it kind of helped with some of the foliage in the park and the vibe. But it was also just very hot. There's a lot of concrete. It's just still definitely like not as nice as the later concept parks. But it was well maintained. I will say this park was very, very pretty. It was in a way, it felt like it was better maintained maybe even than the Ningbo parks. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say that like the Ningbo Park being like for all intents and purposes being an Oriental heritage and a dreamland. I would say both halves of the Ningbo Park of that gate in Ningbo were not as well maintained as the two parks in the Xiamen resort. I guess it also helps that like Xiamen's a smaller resort. The two parks in Xiamen together are combined are about the same size as like one of the Ningbo parks, which is also kind of why it's like I think the quality of the Oriental Heritage Park is so strong, because there really wasn't any room to add anything that wasn't like top tier integral to the experience. But the Dreamland Park was full of surprises. The first thing we did was the mine train, and that was pretty cute.
Yeah, we kind of theorized because it was a school day that all the kids were running to the mine train. You know, because that's like the most kid-friendly roller coaster.
That was a good move on our part. I think that was the right place to start.
So yeah, did we get front row? No, we got back row.
No, we got front row. I filmed it.
That's right, front row. It was cute. I mean, it was kind of what was it? Was it Tibetan themed, which is pretty common theme. Well. It did not run well at all. It tracked like shit. Who made it? Was it Golden Horse? Jinma?
Struggling. Yeah, it was like identical to the one that we rode at the Ningbo Park, but because the Ningbo Park had it indoors, it ran so smooth. And this one in Xiamen felt like it had weathered so many storms. And
yeah, and of course
rusty.
When you think about the actual climate, it's much harsher in Xiamen. And so the theming even, it's all themed, of course, like icy mountaintops. I think thematically it was kind of whitewashed out a little bit. It was kind of cute to take photos of, but it did run. I mean, we've been on so many of these Jinma and what's the other company? The Beijing Shibalai mine trains. We've been on so many of these mine trains now, and usually I love them, especially the newer ones with different track type. I think run very well. In fact, sometimes even better than the Vekoma. But
like the one that we rode was not. Yunnan Paradise.
This was probably the worst one I've ever been on.
This was the worst one. It was really bad. I mean, even a bad mine train is still fun.
Oh my god, it ran so bad. Yeah,
but it ran like really, really poorly. That's what I remember the most about this one, because we, like you said, we've been on so many. It's like they don't all have particularly outstanding qualities, but this one was memorable because it was bad.
Yeah, and it was pretty though. I will say some of these are not that pretty, but this one was pretty. And the views
of like the water park and stuff from the lift hills were nice, and of the other park, of the Oriental Heritage Park, was nice views from up there.
Yeah, because when you look at the layouts of these parks, because of the island being in such a weird shape, they kind of had to just make it happen. And so the shape of the park for either park is not very natural. This one, maybe Dreamland, a little more natural, having a giant circle with all the rides around it in the back, and then having it, then having kind of like the offshoot path on the side. But yeah, I thought it had a nice presence. It just didn't run well. And then right next to it is the shoot to shoot, which is like the biggest attraction from a distance in the whole resort. It is massive. It is bigger than the Skyloop. It is such a big ride. First, I thought it was part of Oriental Heritage.
Me too.
Because the way the parks are shaped.
Like an Oriental Heritage
kind of
ride. But obviously this was just like the direction that they were going in when they were designing stuff like this. This was just like a precursor. The level of appeal, curb appeal that the shoot the shoot ride has would be like a foil for what they would be accomplishing with the Oriental Heritage Parks, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And there were some other attractions there that really highlight that, which we'll get to in a second. But yeah, the shoot to shoot was themed, I think, kind of to like Atlantis-y vibes.
Yeah, it was definitely fantasy, and there were dinosaurs.
Yeah, which I mean, it's typical. I have a feeling they were added later because I think it actually wasn't like Angkor Wat themed, Wasn't it like,
that's what it was.
yeah, so wasn't it,
Yeah, I'm
those
looking at my
Angkor
little
Wats,
videos
yeah.
of it now. That's what it was.
Very pretty, very lush,
Angkor
very
Wat
big.
with dinosaurs.
I mean, that by far took like the biggest, like the most space of anything in the park.
It's a huge ride. And then it's kind of ironic because then Oriental Heritage next door just has a basic shoot the chute with no theming or anything. Just a
I
little
know, that's funny,
oval
right?
shape
Yeah.
shoot the chute. Almost feels like they should be swapped, where like the big beautiful one with 2 drops and an indoor portion is actually at the base park, and the super like ordinary one.
But it's good though, because I think the base
fancy
park needs it more, because the
Definitely
base park
needs
is very basic. So when we were there, like there's pretty much like a giant circle in the back. You can kind of walk around it, and then on the waterfront is where all the rides are. Which you can see the water when you're inside the park, but from the rides you can see it. So next up would have been the Stress Express, the Vekoma Boomerang, except for they were doing some sort of maintenance on the pavement. So we had to walk through kind of like this giant square that's kind of in the middle of the park. And that was full of like flat rides and whatnot. The kids loved it. I mean, it was packed. All the school kids were in the flat ride zones. But anyway, so if you go through there and you go through a little restaurant, you end up with the boomerang. So you have to go through the restaurant to get to the boomerang.
Yeah, that was funny.
Which like, everyone has to do that, no matter what, which is very Chinese. So you go through the restaurant and then you get to the Stress Express, which when it comes to the appearance of this ride, it's definitely like from the Dreamland phase of Fantawild, because, you know, this park opened in 2013. So when they added a boomerang, of course the boomerang had reinforced track, magnetic brakes, MK1212 vest restraints. It has all like the modern upgrades and features, but aesthetically speaking, it is just, you know, a boomerang in a field with switchbacks on concrete. Nothing to really look at. It ran well. You know, it's a modern boomerang with all the upgrades. But yeah, I think the most memorable part was just being so fucking hot. I was sweating so hard. I was like, it's like 10 in the morning.
There was no relief at this part of the park. This corner of the park with the coasters was pretty bare. And unlike the Stress Express Boomerang in Ningbo, which had a really nicely landscaped queue with lots of trees and stuff, obviously they're both identical coasters. But I feel like because the one in Ningbo was at the Oriental Heritage Park, it was a little bit nicer. Whereas the one in the Fantawild, the Stress Express Fantawild Dreamland Edition, was a lot more straightforward. It's just like,
which is funny because I like the color scheme on it.
The color scheme on it was nice.
Yeah, it was like a nice kind of like habanero orange with light blue supports. Yeah, it was quite a pretty ride.
Right yellow train.
Yeah, and then right yellow switchbacks.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's funny because like Alex said, like when we were at the park entrance, there was quite the breeze because we're on that little, you know, like we're at the start of the island and we're actually quite close to the water. There's not a lot of buildings in between us. So like there was a nice breeze when we entered the park. But then by the time we got to the Stress Express, maybe like 25 minutes later, yeah, it was hot. It was hot.
Like the plaza in front of the Sky Loop was just baking. Like it was just too much concrete there in that back area.
I mean, it didn't have any rain. It looked for a second it was going to rain, but then like the clouds dissipated and like it was just, you know, straight sun. Humid. It was very hot. It felt like kind of like Orlando-ish, I guess. You know, like Taiwan, Hong Kong, just hot. Anyway, so then we went to Stress Express. We went to Terror Twister, which the name is kind of cute. Terror Twister, as the name implies, it's the Sky Loop where there's a terror and a singular twist. I'm scared of Sky Loops. They are scary.
I'm always afraid that like, I'm going to sustain
so
some kind of injury, like on my spinal column.
I'm going to be hanging in like a singular little, you know, lap bar upside down for a while. At least it was like an official rides,
but
one.
The older I get, the less I enjoy these. The less I feel like I really want to hang around upside down like that, cresting blood.
But then we rode it. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was phenomenal. It was my favorite thing in the park. Well, maybe there's the one other ride, but
definitely the best coaster at that park.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I ended up really enjoying it because I don't ride these very often. I mean, when's the last time I rode a Sky Loop? Was it the one in Magic Springs during COVID?
Magic Springs, I think. And like we tried to ride the one in Changsha at Joyland, and they told us we couldn't ride it because we were too tall.
That's an official one too, right?
Yeah, that's a real one. That's a Mauer, like a Mauer one. And we also got denied the one at Chanlord Holiday Manor, but that was a DSA or some other, like Hibei Amusements or some other generic. So that one was less of a surprise. but like getting denied the actual authentic one was kind of like, okay, fine. And we were worried. We weren't sure if we were going to get
Well,
all
yeah,
that.
because
Like,
there was like a whole weight limit, and then there was like a height limit, and even though it was like a Western manufactured one, yeah, there was a little weights. There was like a little scale at the
there was a
entrance, and there
bathroom
was a
scale.
height stick. And somehow the staff just let us walk straight past.
And
Like
they
we
were
didn't
just like,
stick out like
yeah,
sore
do you
thumbs.
want to ride?
And
we had a full train,
yeah,
and it was all these school kids, and they were like super jazzed, but like
and there
really
was
scared.
like there was like a few people in their 20s, like us, and
oh yeah, there was like it looked like there were two couples. They were like on a double date.
Are you American? You know, like it was kind of interesting. Yeah, it was very wholesome.
Yeah.
They were all so excited that we were riding the roller coaster. Like, oh, why are you at Fantawild when you're visiting China? And they're like, well, we also do a lot of theme parks in China.
About that. They're like, are you here for work?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, are you here for? Are you students?
Like, oh yeah, we're
students?
here for roller coasters. They're like, what?
So that was good.
But
and
yeah,
then
that was pretty much. Yeah.
Well, there's that one other
that
ride.
was it for that park.
No. Oh, roller coaster wise, yes.
Yeah, coaster wise, that was it for that park.
Coaster wise, yes. So yeah, Alexander was in a rush to get to the other park, which fair enough, this wasn't the nicest park we were in. But I had heard
wasn't in a okay.
Okay, remember you were like, oh, there's nothing else to do? And so we were on our way out. I'm like, I read somewhere that there's like a really good ride here. So we walked by these terracotta warriors, which for the record, we went to Xi'an last fall in September. We had a grand time. We went to the actual terracotta warriors. It was awesome. Anyway, so I was like, oh, look at this, and it said like Qin Dynasty Adventure. And I was like, oh, this must be it. So we're like reading the little sign, and it's talking about some sort of wild ride. We're like, okay, this must be like a pretty wild ride.
It is a ride, like a ride.
A ride. So we go in because like a lot of these parks, I guess Fantawild parks are known for shows. So like half of the buildings you see are actually just massive theaters.
It's hard to know.
Fair. Yeah, it's hard to know whether it's just like a really elaborate entrance to a theater or whether it's like an elaborate entrance to a ride.
On the app, and it's like they're describing things, and it's like lots of buzzwords, but it's still kind of vague about like what
Especially because
once
it's translated into English, it's like it's all buzzwords. It's like
discover
the high thrill of love, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Stuff like that is like the buzzwords.
Whirling passion.
Passion. Well, that could be a show. It could be a ride. Who knows what whirling passion is describing?
Like you never, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
But I was like, I think this park doesn't have like major dark rides, but I wasn't sure. But that's why I like needed your second opinion. Because I was
we walk into the building and it's obvious because first of all, we read the sign. And second of all, we kind of like hear ride vehicles move, I guess, in a way. Kind of like hear that sound. In a way, it kind of sounded like Indiana Jones, which was kind of like the precursor because the ride system for this ride is kind of like Indiana Jones. We expected kind of a queue because didn't it say something like, 25 minutes something or like 30 minutes and we walk in there, but really, really only people in there. Which also was surprising because again, there was like hordes of school groups. Like these are, I don't know what the school kids were doing, but they certainly weren't really riding that much.
Like having lunch. By the time we were done with the coasters, we saw groups like sitting on the ground, picnicking in places, or like at picnic tables, food courts and stuff in the park, but not
right in front of the Booney Bears Burger restaurant.
Food, but like eating stuff that they brought.
So anyway, so then we went to went on the ride, and the ride system is like Indiana Jones. So we sat down, and it's quite a big dark ride. I mean, I guess when we walked past the ride after riding it, we noticed how big the show building was. But at the point of entry, all we really saw was like the entrance to the ride, and we just kind of went inside, and we didn't really know about the scope much. But it really is like a completely Indiana Jones sized Indiana Jones ride. Except for it's themed to the Qin Dynasty, which, for those that don't know, it's the dynasty that unified China. So what is like 2,000 years ago, which is where the terracotta warriors are. It's the same time frame. So it's actually kind of themed to the original Chinese dynasty, where the terracotta warriors are protecting the underground palace. It's actually a theme to all of that. So it really is themed to being in Xi'an, and so. On the ride, I mean, I have a hard time even describing all the ride scenes, but there's a couple of really cool scenes where they use mirrors, and there's really big rooms, and of course there's the River of Mercury, and then the Emperor. becomes, is he in snake form? What form is he in again? There's so much going
I
on.
think he is a snake. I mean, at one point, the terracotta warriors come to life, which is like the part that I was waiting for because of the folklore surrounding the terracotta warriors and like why they were sculpted and why there were so many. That it was like on the off chance that they became enchanted if there was some sort of war between the real world and
There
the
was an
spirit
uprising
world.
from the unified kingdoms in the west, or sorry, in the east. That's the whole reason the terracotta warriors even exist. They're protecting Emperor Qin from the Eastern unified kingdoms that I
'cause they're
guess
all
were unified
facing.
really just means taken over, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
So they're all facing east in case they rise up and try to fight the Qin dynasty and the Qin kingdom, whatever. And so when they, on the ride itself, that actual lore of the, thousands of terracotta warriors coming to life to fight off, the east, that kind of happens on the ride. That's kind of the ride story. And then, rivers of mercury are flowing at the end. It was a very impressive ride because of the scope. Because at one point, there's a lot happening on the ride, and there's kind of like usual tricks in the book that you see, kind of Indiana Jones style, except for you're in a giant temple that's in the ground. But then eventually, you get to a 2-story room where there's a lot of mirrors. So it looks like terracotta warriors go on forever, which is super clever, of course. And is that the scene where they come alive?
Yeah, that's close. That's when we first see them. And then, like, we see, I think, is that the same? There's a room where, like, you have a bridge where you go over the warriors. And then at one point, you re enter that room again at ground level. And that's when the mirror illusion casts a reflection of, like, endless halls of warriors waiting. And then I think in the next scene, or maybe 2 scenes later, they come alive by use of like projection mapping and screens toward the end of the ride, which I thought was great.
It really was a big ride.
ride.
I feel like now we're not describing it properly because I guess like it all happened so quick, and it's only been like 2 months since I've written it, if not less,
So
like
fast.
a month and a half. But
I just loved
somehow,
it. I just remember it was like,
it was kind of overwhelming. It was a cool ride. It was one of those typical Fantawild rides because Fantawild does everything in house, so they're kind of like, besides Disney, Universal, like Efteling, maybe Park, like they're kind of like the next in command when it comes to like dark ride geniusness, because they do design everything themselves, and there are usually very Chinese themes, and they're very high quality, especially the later projects. So this was definitely one of those clear Fantawild dark ride projects. Like it was very immersive, it was massive. Yeah, it was cool. And then of course you exit into a dress shop.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The take
Traditional
your pictures
Chinese wear shop.
kind of. Yeah. Get dressed up for photo shoot in various traditional garb. That ride was so good that I felt like it should have been in the Ningbo Resort. Obviously, it's a Fantawild, a Dreamland.
I feel like it could fit in
ride,
an Oriental Heritage. Right? Yeah.
But it totally could have fit in the Oriental Heritage Park in Ningbo. It was so good that I just felt like, wow, this should have been, even though it's like one of their older attempts at a dark ride, this absolutely should have been in like the later Oriental Heritage projects too. But yeah, like I came off that ride thinking like, wow, I'm really glad we didn't miss that. Like we almost left earlier than necessary, and could have missed that ride. Part of the reason we were in a hurry, I guess, was because we wanted to get to Jungle Trailblazer, the wooden coaster, custom.
It's got me my 900 credit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess some of the rides were opening at Oriental Heritage Park a little bit later.
Yeah.
Which again, Oriental Heritage is like the second gate. So it made sense for us to do Dreamland first, because our goal was like, we'll kind of rush Dreamland because thematically there's not as much to admire. Photo taking is probably not as much fun, and like dark ride wise is not as strong. Which of course we actually didn't know much about the Qin Dynasty adventure when we, prior to visiting. So we spent maybe a little bit more time in the park than I thought we would, but not anything outrageously
It's just because
long.
like it was a very efficient run, because the other park didn't open until like 11. Jungle Trailblazer didn't open until 11:30, and all we knew was that we wanted to be near that ride at its scheduled open, because unlike the Ningbo Resort, the Xiamen parks didn't have Fast Pass. So it was like, whatever you get in line for, like you're waiting for it. You're waiting the whole line. And we weren't sure what the school kid situation was going to be like when we got there either. So we were like, we want to, we don't want to rush, but we wanted to like an efficient, like do everything we want to do and need to do, but not anything that could be a waste of time, because otherwise it could have screwed us at the other gate.
So then we went to Oriental Heritage, which Oriental Heritage again is a concept park, and it's all about classic Chinese culture and mythology and whatnot. But the nice thing about what I didn't realize until visiting is that they're all kind of different, and they're really just paying respect more to their local history. So near Xiamen, there is a lot of those like circular houses. I guess you see them in Mulan in the movie, where it's like circular communities where the outside walls are like fortresses and everyone lives inside the circular community. So that kind of style is actually a city nearby Xiamen. I forgot the name for a second. I can look it up real quick. But when we were on the train was full from Ningbo all the way until the one to last stop, where everyone got off. All the tour groups got off, and that's where like all the classic communities are with those round buildings.
Let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
That is the aesthetic of the entrance to this particular Oriental Heritage, which is very different than the aesthetic of the one in Ningbo, because Ningbo is, of course, close to Shanghai, and the whole, the Suzhou aesthetic was what they used there. So, it's very wide buildings, darker rooftops, and then lots of red, which is also kind of found in Shanghai. But it's a very different aesthetic than the more tropical, earth-tony, orangey look of the architecture that we see around the old parts of like Xiamen and nearby cities. It's in the province of Fujian. So it was kind of nice to see that the entrance to this Oriental Heritage was very different. It was very tropical. It was very warm.
Guangzhou? With a Q? Guangzhou?
Yes, I believe that's what it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then people were getting off there and taking another train inland to see the roundhouses and the communities and stuff.
So that's the aesthetic of it. So when you entered, because of the shape of the resort, there's like a really long corridor into the park, and then along the way, you have kind of all the shopping and the dining, and then there's landscaping, and then eventually you get to a beautiful pond with a snake water statue, and then behind it is the signature drop tower that's inside a giant pagoda. But the way you approached it through these streets to get to like kind of like the beef of the park, that was very enjoyable to me. And then behind that is where you have the kind of like the hub circle. So the park was, how do you describe it? It was like a cone. And because
it's like it fans out. It's like a very narrow fan where like the entire park, when you're at the entrance, is the narrowest bit of the park, and it sort of is really just the width of the main street that you walk down. And it gets steadily wider and stuff to accommodate show buildings and like the lagoon and stuff in the center with the drop tower. But it still doesn't fan out until like anything more than a single midway until like halfway down the park. And even then, the hub connects the main midway to like a kind of a small loop, and then also the entrance to the water park. So it's kind of like a 4-point hub, and even then it's not like a huge loop or anything, just because the park physically is so skinny, oblong shaped, rather than like a big like box.
But I kind of loved it because it really felt like you went somewhere. Like you entered, and then you navigated these streets, and there was so much landscaping and palm trees and creeping vines and whatnot. And this park is 4 years younger than the Dreamland Park. It was open in 2017. Of course, it was developed while the other park was open. So anyway, so then when you finally get to the giant pagoda and the lagoon, it all felt very tropical and lush. And there weren't many people there, despite there being quite some school groups, kind of where all the rides were in the back, like kind of like the jungle trailblazer area, which is the least themed of everything. It's just very jungly with a wooden roller coaster. But you still don't really understand what that has to do with Oriental Heritage. But whatever, it's probably just like it needs to check like the throw box somewhere along the way. it was a very pretty park. And so this park is a little bit different than the original we visited, or the first one we visited, the Ningbo one. First of all, again, much prettier than the Ningbo one. The layout
Yeah, the
is, I think, much
landscaping was
cooler.
beautiful. The
Landscape was
foliage.
amazing. This park is also home to a colorful kingdom dark ride, which is the Chinese version of a small world. Same scope, maybe a little bit less detail and then puppetry, but still plenty of little animatronics where they sing this little like Chinese song, which I can't really sing, and I won't even attempt with this voice. But I think I like this one better.
Yeah, this was we wrote the one at Oriental Heritage. I mean, like we said, most of the rides, a lot of the big rides have like overlap. Either they're like identical or they're really similar. Some of the dark rides that we did, we're kind of contingent on like whether we would be able to ride them at the Xiamen Park when we had more time. The one exception, well, I guess there was two exceptions. There's two dark rides that we rode, both visits. The one with the kids, the little colorful kingdom ride, was really because we felt like it was so neat, but the one in Ningbo didn't feel like it was as well maintained as it might have been. And then once we were walking around the Xiamen Park, we were like, well, let's ride this one and see if it's better. And I would say it was slightly better. There's just like the small world rides upon which they were based. It's a lot of little animatronics, a lot of movement, and not all the animatronics that should be moving actually are moving. But the sets are really well designed, and the animatronics that are working are really nice, and the layouts are different. So like it was still a physically different ride from the one that we rode in Ningbo as it was. And just a unique ride that was worth doing again while we were at another park that had the same ride while we had time.
Yeah, first we were going to ride it. It was really actually on the way out that we decided, oh, you know what, let's just like get it in anyway, because this one we had a pretty good run. We rode pretty much everything that was open. And we even saw that one show, which we'll talk about in a second. So we're like, all right, might as well just get the credit and also have ridden this colorful kingdom. So, but the first thing we hit when we got to the park was a Jungle Trailblazer, which Jungle Trailblazer is a Gravity Group, Martin and Flemix built wooden coaster, of course.
Yeah, it's just a custom wooden coaster.
Quite a good layout, to be honest. So I do not like the Timberliner trains. I don't know if I complained about that in the Ningbo episode, but I'm going to complain about it again. I am not a fan of the of those trains. They make no sense. The side restraints are awful. I don't think it tracked that well. I don't know. It's just like big overhype to me. In fact, I don't even know people enthusiasts really care about that. I hear more negative things than positive things.
People appreciated them more when they were first showing up on rides.
Yeah.
And they do better on small to medium-sized wooden coasters. Once you start getting into the bigger coasters, like I will say...
But the Jungle Trailblazer is a massive coaster. I mean, like...
They are big rides. I think the bigger the coaster is, the more that the experience suffers at the hands of the Timberliners. Because
the layout of these coasters is really ambitious, right? So if you look at Jungle Trailblazer, this particular park, this one didn't have an inversion, but the layout I think was way cooler than the one in Ningbo. And
definitely,
it has like a really steep first drop, and then it has a bunch of airtime moments and like sideways twister moments, and then later on there's another like giant hill. So it's definitely like one of those like high paced rides with great pacing and lots of like variety and elements, and it doesn't just, make its way back to the station by decreasing the height and speed of drop slowly. It's a really varied layout. It goes into the superstructure. I can't even exactly tell you how the layout goes, but it was quite long and enjoyable. But then the train just kind of ruined it for me. And because, I guess I can barely fit in these trains, and they're not consistent with their mechanism. So like in Ningbo, I didn't really have much of an issue getting on. I just didn't think they were comfortable. But then on this one, they wouldn't let me ride it first. They said, okay, you're not going to, fitting, it's not clearing. And, they wouldn't even really give me a shot. They immediately opened the train and said, like, you have to get out. And I was like, this is my 900th credit. I'm not going to go without a fight. Because I knew that, like, I just rode, like, 2 days prior in Ningbo, I just rode one, and I didn't even have to get rechecked to get on. So they really had to push it on me. Well, actually, they didn't even want to push it on me. I pushed it on myself. And eventually, like, the train cleared, they let us ride, but it was kind of an awkward situation because they were having kids translate to us so we couldn't ride, which is like a very Chinese experience. Because anytime we can't ride, or I'm too tall or whatever, they
A
point
school
at
kid
kids
has to
because
step
the
in.
school kids speak English, and then they're telling us some dramatic story about like you're gonna fall out and die, or you're gonna chop your head off, and I'm like, this is not what's gonna happen. That's not how that works, But they're over here like, making these school kids tell us what's going on. Anyway, long story short, we ended up riding, and it was painful for me anyway because I was so stapled on that. And the way the restraints work, it's like one leg is fine, the other leg is just like squished to death because of the way the restraints work. Ride layout I could really appreciate, but to say I enjoyed my ride experience is maybe incorrect. But Alex, who was probably more comfortable, I'm going to let you kind of tell about your experience on a ride.
Yeah, I enjoyed the ride. I mean, none of these Chinese wooden coasters, with the exception of Wood Coaster in Shenzhen, like pretty much every Chinese wooden coaster experience involves getting stapled, and then like any of the parts of the ride where there would have been airtime is like rendered airtimeless by being stapled. And then like laterals are a lot harsher because you are so tight in the train and there's just not a lot of give. It's great. I liked this one a lot better than the one in Ningbo. I felt like it ran better and it had a better layout. The Ningbo one was just so rough. Like, I think anybody who's ridden Mindblower recently at Fun Spot in Kissimmee, that's kind of the experience that you can expect. It was like total brain aneurysm wooden coaster with a corkscrew in it. The one in Xiamen felt a little more forgiving, probably just because it's newer. I doubt that they've been maintaining it any differently. It's just not as old. But a great ride to have ridden. It was a great experience. The layout was so cool. The layout was cool enough that it wasn't like what was bad about the ride didn't feel as distracting. Whereas the one
what was nice about this Jungle Trailblazer is that it actually was in a jungle.
Yes.
Which like the foliage in Xiamen again is so tropical, so there was like lots of foliage and palm trees and jungle vibes, and also the rides on the water in the river. So you have various points where like you have a gorgeous view of the water and the city in the background. Location wise, this was absolutely spectacular wooden coaster. Something I didn't think I didn't really realize until we drove by the park in the morning on the other side of the river, and I realized like, oh wow, I didn't realize like on the river. We'd see photos on Earth, whatnot, But then the wooden coaster is very prominent, and then riding it kind of get that same vibe. Like it was very pretty and enjoyable, like lush.
It just had a lot more redeeming qualities than the one in Ningbo, which
I agree.
Ningbo's layout is just not very enriching. The foliage around it is non-existent.
Yeah, agreed.
Jungle Trailblazer Xiamen was great.
Again, everything about this Oriental Heritage, I think, was nicer. That included. And then there's another coaster there, which is the Galaxy Express.
Galaxy Express.
Nothing saying name, but it's just a
Vekoma. Nothing to do with galaxies or trains.
Express or anything.
Yeah, like
it's just
great.
a pretty average, but very, very smooth and well maintained and colorful. Vekoma suspended family coaster. It's the Orkanon layout. What is the official name of the layout? It's like Dragonfly.
Orkanon, I think, is the way that it's most described, like on Roller Coaster Database and stuff, because that was the first one. But yeah, Dragonflyer at Dollywood. We rode one of these at Nanjing Happy Valley, and obviously the one at Dollywood. I don't know if we've ridden any others besides the B&M layouts ones at the other Happy Valley parks that are like, oh no, that's a different layout. Never mind. That's the Flight of the Pterosaur layout. This layout is, I looked it up, and for some reason I thought there were more of these. There's only like 7 or 8, and like half of them are in China.
There's quite a few in China, like the circus themed ones and the whatever themed ones. They're all themed some random.
Yeah, they're all at different Fantawild parks. But it was a great little coaster, a great little compliment to Jungle Trailblazer.
Front row, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was nice.
Because again, choosing rows is not really a thing in most Chinese parks nowadays. So that was kind of nice that we got front row. Ran well. I may secretly have liked it better just because it was really comfortable. But of course,
I
like
think you
Jungle
said this
Trailblaze is
before,
way
but in
cooler.
retrospect, we should have just written it again
Yeah.
because there was no line.
And we spent a couple trains for taking photos, and we could use written again as well. But that's okay because we had other plans because we were gonna go to this show, and I forgot the name, but it's something about butterfly. That's kind of like the
Butterfly
theme.
Lovers or something.
Yeah, Butterfly Lovers, I think it was.
What a great show it was,
Fantawild
too.
is known for shows, and we didn't really get the chance to see any of the big shows when we were in the Ningbo Resort. Because by the time we had too much to do in the Ningbo Resort, and by the time we got to or at the Heritage Park, it was already kind of late in the day, and we did actually do Battle for the Temple of Jinchang. We did do that show, which is like a boat ride show, which they also have at this park, but you just didn't do it here. Which is really spectacular. Again, listen back to our Ningbo episode. We'll talk about it in quite some detail there. But then here we wanted to do Love of the Butterfly, if it's how it's called, show, which was a technological masterpiece. So you enter the show, and there's 4 seating areas, kind of like in a circle, but it's like, like I guess in a square. So you're facing the 4 sides of the stages in the middle. When you enter, it's covered up by drapery. And then first we sat somewhere that I guess weren't allowed to sit, but then later they filled that anyway. But anyway, doesn't matter. So we're sitting on one side of it, and the drapery lowers, the lights turn off, and then it's a projection mapping show in a way with actual actors. And the way it's done, how it's so hard to describe. Alex, you can describe this better, I think.
So it's a kind of a diamond-shaped theater. And so there's, 4 theater sections arranged in a square. And each theater section is facing a very large pane of glass at a 45-degree angle. And this is designed to achieve a transparent, like Pepper's Ghost effect for projection mapping purposes. And so the stage in the middle is physical. It's physically there. It's a 4-sided. It's almost like a wrestling ring. Like the stage is a perfect square. But then between each theater section and the stage is a 45-degree angle giant pane of glass and a projector on the below the floor that projects pretty much all of the props. There's no physical props in this entire show, and they do a lot. There's scenes and landscape, architecture, buildings. There's kind of abstract stuff to function as transitional sequences in between the scenes that are acted out by real people. And it's a lot of like one person stands in one corner of the square stage and one person stands in the other corner of the square stage, and they have interactions and stuff and conversations. The show is really designed where you could view it from any of angle. The 4 faces of the square and get essentially the same show, because each theater has its own projection mapping for the scenes, for the props, and then you have the actors on the stage that their stage sequences happen in such a way that everybody...
Well, it's all like diagonal.
4 sides.
So anything they do is diagonal, which then from all 4 angles looks as if they're moving across the the screen, the visual set. But really, because they're just running diagonal, like almost like in a cross shaped, it always looks, for any side you're looking at, it looks like they are, like, how do you describe that? Like,
it was great. It was really awesome. There was one part where there was one girl that had like the monologue, and she was kind of like wandering around the stage, but there was a point in the monologue each time where she was facing one of the 4 audience sections so that everybody got like some FaceTime with her. There would be something to be said for seeing the show more than once and doing it from a different point of view. But like every seat is a good seat. You get a good show no matter where you're sitting. It's just really neat. It was super high capacity.
And it was a long show, and it really felt like super high quality.
Long. Well done.
Something like I feel like this would be something that people would pay for in like Vegas or something,
Oh yeah.
And it was a very, very nice show. Like we came out and thinking like, wow, this is like the highlight of the day. Something that if we were to miss out on this, it would have been like a shame. Would have not given the park like like a real valid review, because I feel like shows like this, along with the ride we're going to talk about next, really kind of highlight the ambition of Fantawild. And I mean, Fantawild does things that people don't know about in the West because it's it's just Fantawild, like it's China. I get it, but it's really high quality stuff. It's really up there. A lot of this is up there with like Disney, Universal, Efteling, and I keep saying that, but it's really true. And the Oriental Heritage and the Glorious Orient parks really showcase the ambition. And I mean, this show was phenomenal. It was super cool.
I got emotional. We don't speak further. I don't know if we mentioned this particularly often, but like we don't speak Chinese. We go to China a lot, but we don't actually speak Mandarin. So when we see a show and all of the dialogue is in Mandarin, we're just kind of guessing based on context clues and stuff. And even without being able to understand a word of the dialogue, it was so it was a beautiful and moving show. Like I felt moved. I felt emotionally impacted by the show just because the performances that were given were so beautiful and the stage setup was so clever. The music was so good. So yeah, it was definitely a highlight. Absolutely a highlight. And it felt like we were doing something kind of culturally significant on top of being at a park.
Well, yeah, because I guess the story was like a really classic Chinese story, which, it's always kind of fun. It's kind of like a cultural experience, like you said. And then there was another major attraction that only runs every hour. It was called Bridge to Love.
At first, there was another reason why we couldn't tell some of these attractions if they were shows or rides, because some of these rides are so high capacity that they don't need to run them more than once an hour on like a typical business day, like Chinese business day. So like that was the one show that we did, well, the show ride type hybrid thing that we did at the Ningbo Park. We were like, is it a ride? Is it a show? It has a show time, but it's a ride vehicle for part of it. And then this other, so like if you've ridden Universe of Energy, rest in peace, at Epcot, you know what kind of ride system this next attraction uses. And it was another thing where it was like, is this a ride or is it a show? Because it had show times, once every hour. But then you walk in and it's the giant Universe of Energy vehicles. And you're like, oh, it is a ride.
It's kind of cute because before we actually walked into the building where the ride's located, the cast member or whatever, the staff member was like, oh, like, are you sure you want to do this? Because it's, a very long ride.
They're like,
and
it's
all about China and China's culture and China history. And we're like, yeah, that's the whole point of us being here.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we want to do that. And she was so really excited. Pleased to hear that, even though it's all in Mandarin and it's all about Chinese folklore or whatnot. So we wrote it. It was interesting. Of course, we didn't understand any of it. And the ride was very long. I mean, how long was this ride? It was at least 25 minutes.
It was great. It was amazing. Awesome. It's just
so lots of kind of describe the ride?
Yeah. It's lots of like scenes and setup of like different Chinese cultures and customs and things. It felt a little bit like Colorful Kingdom, where we're exploring different vignettes of like different provinces and regions and cities in China throughout history, but with just like more like photorealistic setups and then projections. Lots of the Fantawild parks, they love projection mapping. They love doing Pepper's Ghost stuff because they will forever have the 45-degree angle panes of glass projecting life-size human actors acting out scenes inside of like rooms and stuff, houses, buildings, various things, acting out the sequences of events or like performing, either having like conversations with family members or friends or like playing music or dancing or writing poetry or painting. They're just doing all of these things. And when you're from far away, the way that you're positioned, the projections are so crisp, it almost looks real. And it's not until you like slowly
move past and then you realize
the
their screens.
That you realize that they're not, because we're like these people, and then we get to the scene, we're like, oh no, and then we turn a corner, we're like, oh no, that's a real person, and then we get closer, I'm like, oh no, just kidding, it's not.
Well, because I feel like a lot of this was designed to have real people on it, and the way that they describe it on their website, especially like Battle for Jingchang Temple, I feel like there's the low crowd version, which is the version that we get the ride because we don't go on like super crazy busy days, like Chinese holidays, where there is not a ton of actors. It's just mostly screens. And in the case for this particular ride, Bridge to Love, I think it was all screens when we went. And then I think there's days where they actually do have live actors performing out the scenes that are otherwise replaced by a screen based on how busy it is.
Yeah, that would make sense. But yeah, in any case, like I thought it was a neat ride. And then the finale scene, you go into that room that is like a giant turntable and like the big like 360 screen in the ceiling. I'm like, this is so Epcot. It's so Epcot. These Fantawild, the Oriental Heritage Parks are so Epcot coded, except that it's all China. And it's all like exhibits and like high capacity, slow moving rides for kids and old people to learn about their history and learn about like folklore, like the fanciful history and stuff. And then you get into the glorious Orient Parks.
in their next in their next concept, which is the glorious Orient Parks, where themes get a lot heavier and it's like modern China and a lot of warfare. Again, teaching about the country, and it's a very fascinating concept, but they seem to be doing okay for themselves. And the ride that was unique to this park was Rumble Under the Sea, which was another massive dark ride with massive ride vehicles. It was a kind of like a Transformers kind of ride, except for it moved slower and it had more scenes where you would stand still for a while and a lot of stuff would happen. It's obviously very screen based, but the theme is a sort of underwater kingdom, almost like Atlantis-y vibes. And of course, it's very Chinese in all of its aesthetics. Lots of dolphins chasing by you. And then, how do you even describe this ride? I feel like a lot of these rides are hard to describe because the themes are kind of unconventional to the west.
Like a rudimentary Pirates of the Caribbean and Shanghai kind of system with like the big flat boat vehicles, but with no water. And this one, so this was one of the rides, one of the few rides that was at this Oriental Heritage Park, but not at the Ningbo Oriental Heritage Park. So I thought maybe like it wouldn't be as good. Maybe it was, a ride that they were passing over for some of the later parks because maybe they weren't as happy with how it turned out or it wasn't as popular. I thought it was a great ride. It's not as good as like the Niwa Colors the Sky ride or anything like that. But it was cute. It was a cool ride. It was unique. It was worth doing. It was surprising. It is a physically not a huge ride. It's like you said, you really park in the scenes for a long time. It feels almost more like a motion simulator than a dark ride because you don't travel a lot of distance. You really are just moving from scene to scene. And the scene plays out. I just remember
being very impressed with the quality because there was scenes with fire and there was scenes with like really good projection mapping. There was like bubbles coming from the ceiling. I remember being like really impressed by the way they did some of the stuff, and I wish I had a better memory of it because I guess maybe I'm dying because my memory is not great of any of this stuff. And again, we wrote this like 6 weeks ago. I guess we should review those before recording this. I just, my impression was that it was a great ride, and I was very impressed with some of the theatrical elements. And at one point, the whole ride vehicle spins. I think it felt like a really high quality thing.
A circle vision 360 moment in the ride. Where
but one of the doors closes, and like I guess all the doors are closed. Mm-hmm. And I remember you telling me on the ride, oh wow, yeah, I was kind of wondering how they did that because you drive in and there's obviously it's a dead end. It wasn't even crossed my mind. I guess I was tired, and you were telling me like, oh, like there's a dead end, and I'm like, oh, and then of course behind there's a giant door close because then these are giant ride vehicles, so there's giant door closes, and then we're in this scene. It's like Alex said, like a circle vision. And eventually, a door blows open thematically as you exit the scene again. So like it really felt. I wonder if they haven't done it again because it was so expensive to do all that it does because it's such a big ride vehicle and giant swinging doors and a lot of physical effects. I mean, this was a very advanced ride for something that maybe wasn't even that impressive to the general audience because I mean it was all themed as being underwater and like a bunch of dolphins and dragons. Dolphins and dragons. So I want to call that right going forward. I wouldn't be surprised
if that was also. I guess another thing is, well, I was going to say maybe it was because it has an underwater theme and like maybe doing like a under the sea like mermaid theme attraction is not like something they want to go for with every park, but with like Xiamen, because it's on the water, it's on an island, maybe that's like more pertinent. But then the Ningbo parks aren't far from the ocean either. They're right on the Hangzhou River Delta. So I don't know, but no, I think you're probably right. It's probably just that the ride was very expensive to do, and then maybe didn't have the reaction or the attendance that they thought it would have for the design costs and operating costs. But for whatever reason, it is unique to this this particular Oriental Heritage. It might be at one of the other Oriental Heritage parks around, but it definitely wasn't at the Ningbo one. So babe, if I could have looked this up in advance, I didn't think to do it. I was like, it may be the only one, but there might be another or two, just because the Oriental Heritage parks, really all the Fantawild parks, kind of drag and drop rides, like between parks and even between branches, between brands.
And then there's, of course, the New Patches, the Sky dark ride, which we've ridden the one in Ningbo. This is a great ride. This is like a Transformers style dark ride. I think higher quality. It's a really clever use of screens. Again, very fanciful mythology that is Chinese, with gods fighting over a gem that you then save. Topped off with a beautiful finale of How to Train Your Dragon musical score.
Right.
Can't go wrong. I won't go into too much of
the part
detail.
You remember the most. This is the How to Train Your Dragon music.
Oh yeah, because it's like, wow, good dark ride, so spectacular. This one was particularly polished. This one was even more polished, I think, than the one in Ningbo. Yeah. And then of course you end with that sound score. But yeah, really, really phenomenal ride. Very massive. I mean, again, dark rides are really, really good at these parks. I just don't want to go into too much detail of this because we spent another episode talking about a lot of these rides already. So if you want to learn more about some of these dark rides, like New Patches of Sky, you just visit the Ningbo episode from earlier this season, and it's called the Fantawild Ningbo and the scariest dark ride ever. Which there was some really scary dark rides at that particular resort.
Yeah, glorious Orient.
So we'll talk about that a couple episodes ago. So just check that out. And then, for sake of time, it really is time to move into the next park because we are already way more recording than I thought we would do
on just these two parks.
I thought we were going to spend like 40 minutes max on this. So that's funny because the next park I think is even more important than these two parks, which is why we're ending with
Yunnan Paradise is amazing, but I also feel like it's easier to talk about because there's no dark rides.
Doesn't have a lot of dark rides. So, Colorful Yunnan Paradise is located in Kunming, which is in the Yunnan province. And Yunnan province is kind of known for being incredibly pretty and has all these gorges and these mountains and these like temples it's like very picturesque. I think if you picture like a lot of like classic China and all of its subcultures, Yunnan is the place to go. So this park opened in 2018 and it's themed to celebrating all of Yunnan and all of its regions because Yunnan has all sorts of climates, all sorts of regions, and so pays homage to the ethnic minorities found in Yunnan. So that's kind of like a cool theme. And then the park itself, I think, was actually one of the best maintained parks I've ever seen in China. It was very polished, very clean, well staffed. It really felt like it was like a Changnam Ocean Kingdom / Disney level theme park when it came to like the actual appearance and maintenance and vibe of the park. It lacked, again, dark rides. But it was very polished park, very colorful Yunnan Paradise.
Yeah. It delivered on the promise of color. The whole entrance plaza is a giant peacock tail. The Ferris wheel is a giant peacock tail, but in a radius. My one regret is that we weren't there at night. And this was totally the kind of park that would lend itself to being at night because the pictures that I've seen of the light package was awesome. Yeah. Next time. But yeah, we got there bright and early, first thing.
Another nice thing about this park is that it's located on Lake Dashi, which is the big lake that is in I think it's Dashi. I hope I said it right. That's where Kunming sits on. Kunming kind of wraps around the lake. So just from the park, the views are just gorgeous because you're looking at this giant expanse with mountains and then the lake in the middle of it. It was so pretty. And then I just thought that overall, it was just very, very pretty park. The location of it was awesome. And you could tell it was high quality because they had an actual Western hotel brand of their official hotel was what was it again? Was it a...
Is it a Best Western?
What was their official? No, it was a higher brand than that. Wow, why am I so bad at this?
Was it a Holiday Inn?
No. It was sort of like maroon colored. Oh my god, I'm gonna Google this. You could talk about the park.
Anyway, so we go to colorful Yunnan Paradise bright and early. You're gonna already tell that we're in for a treat because like the entrance plaza is gorgeous. It's got some inspiration from the Xiamen stone forests, which is one of the world's most famous natural phenomenons. Giant limestone.
It was a Crown Plaza.
Oh, Crown Plaza. Okay, so I was close. Holiday Inn, Crown Plaza, IHG.
It was nice. And the hotel looked really good. The reviews were awesome for it.
Yeah.
So they have a really nice resort hotel at this park. Yeah.
But yeah, so the entrance plaza was beautiful and did a nice job of highlighting some of Kunming's, or the Yunnan province's like most beautiful natural wonders with the stone forest references and like waterfalls and stuff. We ended up doing a scenic walk around the park because, of course, we went straight to the custom B&M wing coaster, but it wasn't open yet.
Disappointed it was closed. Unfortunately, first hour of the park, I guess.
Yeah, and we went to the mine train, and I think that one was also not going to be open for the first hour. And then by the time we got to the Blue Fire clone, it had opened for the day. Or maybe it did open at 10. Oh, you know what it was? It was the two coasters. So the park is shaped kind of in a bow tie shape. And on one side of the bow tie has the two Mac coasters in each corner, and they were both open at 10.
Yeah, because what is it, like 5 major lands or 6 major lands? You have the hub, the kiddie land, and then you have the land that has the mine train, which is themed more to kind of like South Asian tropical cultures with lots of gold and
close to like all the bordering, all the communities in that part of China that like border other countries.
Yeah, like Laos and stuff, right? And then you have and then you have the part that's more themed to the mountains. It is not specifically themed to Tibet because it's all themed to Yunnan, but it kind of has that aesthetic to it with like the flags, like a mountain, like a high
Tibet,
mountain top.
So it's like close.
Yeah, and then you have there's actually elephants in China, and so there's the part that's themed to where the elephants are at, and then of course the Tiger Leaping Gorge is a really famous waterway gorge in Yunnan province, which is where the other section is themed to. So it's actually kind of cool. Yeah,
there's a lot of the whole concept of this park is really well done, and the execution of this park was awesome.
But like the biggest 4 attractions.
Open. Lots of rides.
Also, the Ferris wheel is great. Massive Ferris wheel. Of course, there's the big 4 coasters that we're going to talk about. But before we do that, I do want to mention that their flying theater was one of my favorite flying theaters in the world. Of course, we've done so many flying theaters now. We're kind of flying theater snobs. God, we've done so many. I can't even count. I feel like we should do like a rundown at one point of all the flying theaters we've done. But this was another situation
where I thought that we had ridden everything and that there were no dark rides, and then we walked by the flying theater and we're like, oh shoot, I think this is a flying theater, like we have to do this. And I'm so glad we did,
because this one was a different kind of format where it fit in like a small silo circular building, cylindrical building. It wasn't super obvious it was a flying theater. I thought it was
just a show.
So when we got in there, the queue was filled with all these traditional Yunnan outfits and headwear and whatnot. And then when you actually get on the ride, it is all shot by drone, I believe. And it's all these really famous parts of Yunnan and all these different cultures and landscapes. And it made me realize that we really barely touched Yunnan. I mean, in the airport, we were speaking to someone and she had gone on, like a 14-day vacation through Yunnan and didn't even go through Kunming except for the airport, which we spent most of our time in Kunming. Mm-hmm. And there were so many things that I wanted to do that we just didn't have time for because it took a while to travel out to these places. We did one thing. We took a train out to Dali, which we did the 3 pagodas there, a gorgeous classic ancient town in the mountains, typical Yunnan. And there's so much more of that in Yunnan. And the actual flying theater shows so much of that. I was really impressed. And the elephants it shows you and all the waterways. And then there's the moon gates, which is like a really tall rock formation on the side of a mountain with a hole in it. And they call it the moon gate. And man, there's so much I want to do now. All these festivals that we're showing.
The rice farm that has like all of the layers of rice paddy lagoons.
Yeah, the red ones, right?
Yeah, and they all like
Yeah.
are these beautiful reflections of the sky, like broken up by these very slight berms separating them. Just like
Yeah, there was many places that, I mean, it was a long ride. It was a very long ride. There must have been at least 20, if not more, scenes.
yeah.
Um, and that was definitely a highlight for us. And I think it was why I liked it so much, because I really felt like this park was so in touch with what it's trying to represent. It was such a beautifully presented showcase of all these different cultures and all these different landscapes that can be found in Yunnan, which again I think is the most diverse culturally province in all of China. And so, yeah, I really, not to say I got emotional, but it really was kind of an emotional experience. I think at the end of the ride, we were both like close to tears. It was very respectful in a way. I thought it was a very nice showcase of
It
things.
was sad because that was like the last ride of the last park of the last day of our time in Yunnan. Really, it was the last day of the trip because we didn't do well. We know we did our Hong Kong Disneyland day on the way out, like we are always inclined to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had just had such a wonderful time in the Yunnan province, and then going to the Yunnan province themed park that did such a nice job of distilling some of the things that we loved about being there. It was like, we're gonna miss this a lot. Like, I didn't really want it to end. We had some really nice experiences, not only here, but we also went to another little tiny park attached to the city park in Kunming, and got a couple of cheeky credits and admired the...
Yeah, which are actually both surprisingly good. I guess we can finish the episode with that. But
we'll talk about
let's talk about the Colorful Yunnan Paradise roller coaster. So there is I guess a quick thing. There's a couple of cool shows. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the Major Stunt Show, and there's also like a really, really, really slow monorail that goes around the park, and it's very pretty. But somehow, even on the slowest monorail in the entire universe, the train dispatches were not great enough to take any photos of rides from there. So that's the thing. But anyways, and the coasters themselves,
and it's not the park's fault. It's just there was nobody there, so like. It wasn't there were lines for rides and they weren't dispatching the trains very quickly. They were just kind of waiting
for people to show up and then fill a train and send it, which sometimes meant like 10, 15 minutes between trains on some rides. It really wasn't great. But again, anytime you walk up to a ride, you are the next train. It's just you have to sometimes wait for more people to show up.
There's no such thing as waiting for more than a one train wait. Like, you show up and as long as the train is in the station, you're on.
Yeah.
The only time you're waiting is if it's on the track somewhere.
So the mine train is one of the modern Jinma mine trains. So same layout as the one we just described in Xiamen, except for the fact that it has the newer track type and it tracks so much better. And it's just a copy of the Calamity Mine, except it's missing the final helix. So where there's the final helix on the Calamity Mine Vekoma layout, the original. This one, just mostly I think because of tracking, just the pacing just runs out. Like, it doesn't have the energy to do a helix. So it just a turn and it breaks. Like it doesn't do all that. But this one was really beautifully situated on water, half of it on water, and just like everything else at this park, it was gorgeously themed. It had a giant, almost like a gate, that it went through. It
reminded me of like a torii that you went through. Obviously, it's not a torii, but it's like a Chinese version. Some sort of gate.
Lots
Maybe
of gold, lots of different kinds of landscape. There's a koi pond underneath the ride. It was a very, very pretty ride. The only weird thing about this is that Chinese love just naming things the product line. Like, this is just called Mine Train. It's not themed to a mine whatsoever, except for the ride vehicles of Mine Train, and everything else is themed to some sort of temple that has to do with like some sort of ethnic minority or a culture of Yunnan, which I'm not versed enough to discuss that in confidence.
It was very Thailand coded. You could that was what it reminded me of.
Kind of aesthetic wise, yeah. And then, I mean, the ride was good. There's not much to talk about. Then the launch coaster, which is the
Blue Fire Clone. Blue Fire Clone. It was just called Launch Coaster.
Just called Launch Coaster, but this one
just Launch Coaster
is one of the 3 coasters that has the giant animal statues. So there is 2 giant rock elephant statues that you launch in between, where they're standing up on their feet with their hands up or their arms up and their trunks up in the air. And these are massive statues. I mean, they are as tall as the ride is, if not taller.
They're very
it's really
dramatic
impressive,
and cool.
Very dramatic, and definitely a choice. And it feels very inspired by Walrus Splash at Xiamen Ocean Kingdom. which is, of course, 7 years older, that park. 7 at least, I think. No, 4 years older. Only 4 years older.
Yeah, it's only, You could tell that they looked at, when they were designing this park, they knew who to look at, because they looked at Xiamen and
Ocean Kingdom.
And they were like, okay, Mack Rides, water coaster, Mack Rides, launch coaster is a great idea. You know, the big animals, being a wing coaster. Like it was obviously like they knew whose notes to copy off of. They knew which homework to steal. Which was great,
because I feel like quality-wise, these two parks are very similar, despite, of course, Xiamen and Ocean Kingdom having a little more to do. But yeah, so there's these two giant elephant statues, and the queue is very lush and beautiful and tropical, and the ride's beautiful landscape.
In between the elephants, you're like underneath it all.
Yeah, and then you see the train launch, and then like as you make your way around the queue, eventually you are between the brake run and the launch. As you walk towards the station, if you turn around, you can see, of course, the giant elephants and the trains that launch by. We took some videos and photos there. Gorgeous ride. Runs really well. Because it's so well themed, I think I actually like it better than Blue Fire in Europa Park. Like I've only done 3, I think, so close. Far. Yeah. 2 of them are in China. I think my rankings currently is Launch Coaster at Colorful Yunnan Paradise, then Blue Fire, and then Steam Racers in Wuxi Sunak. But yeah, it was a great ride. Ran well.
I'd have to agree. Yeah. Beautiful ride. Great landscaping.
Pretty. Definitely kind of like a jungly theme to it, you know, with the straw and wood approach. But it was such a gorgeous ride. Again, for this, guys, you need to go visit thecoastkings.com and look at the photos, or go to our social media, because we're going to be posting photos and videos of these rides for the foreseeable, like, next probably week after posting this. So definitely, keep checking back, and we'll be posting about like how pretty these rides are. Another ride there is the Tiger Leaping Gorge, which Alex already kind of mentioned, is the Max Super Splash. And this one is really themed to the actual gorge, which is located not too far from Kunming, maybe like a 3-hour bullet train ride. And I kind of want to do this on a trip because I didn't have time. So maybe in the future we'll have to go back to the actual gorge. But the ride itself is themed to, you guessed it, tigers. And there's these giant 2 statue tigers over the drop, very dramatic. And then you splash down, and there's 2 tiny tigers that are like normal sized tigers that stand on the rocks that you blow by. It's like 4 tigers, I guess. It's a very pretty ride. I mean, the landscaping, you can walk all around it. There's these wooden bridges. I kind of gave like a King of Ka feel, the aesthetic of it. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. Golden
Kingdom. It's like if you imagine King of Ka, like the aesthetic of King of Ka, same color palette and whatnot, but then it's like a Max Super Splash, and that's actually just all teal. Standard, though.
Unlike Walrus Splash, which has the big extended water flume portion with the exhibit. This is just a Atlantica Super Splash Europa Park clone, but done very well. And you know what was funny about this was, like, we got in line and like they were giving us all these ponchos and stuff and like things for our shoes, and I don't know, it just didn't seem, we hadn't seen anybody riding like what people looked like when they got off the ride, but we had just assumed that it wouldn't be that bad because like we've ridden Super Splash rides before, and it's not like riding Popeye's Bilge-Rat barges or anything. And then we rode, and everything was fine. The splashdown was great. Like
we're like, ride, oh wow, this is not bad at all. We're in great shape.
Yeah.
But then every few freaking meters, there's a water cannon, and you're slowly drifting back to the station.
Yeah, just the little turnaround at the end.
After water cannon.
Just nailed.
And it got
just
so
ended.
wet.
Just absolutely.
I mean, we were absolutely
bodied.
Destroyed. I mean, it felt like the ponchos didn't do anything.
There was
shitty ponchos that I barely fit in.
For this. This is violent. This is gratuitous.
I will say the park, we must give kudos to the park and its plastic waste, because, I mean, there's, I think it's pretty typical that plastic waste in all forms of anything in China. Like if you buy like a Haiti, you get like a really firm plastic cup that is really a single use, but you could have used this for years if you wanted.
Yeah, like you could probably throw it in a plastic
bag, in a plastic holder, and then you just, like the amount of plastic that you use just to get a tea in China is insane. So this park is giving out ponchos and like shoe ponchos, that we call those things, aren't the shoes, at like every water ride.
Everything is covered except for your lap, and then you come off of this thing and throw your ponchos away, and it's like dry sneakers, dry socks, dry shirt, and then a lap.
Speak for yourself.
Wet.
I was wet everywhere.
Dry. dryish.
Anyway, but like when we were going by the Rabbits ride on the monorail, I remember seeing boxes and boxes of ponchos. They were just pulling ponchos out and handing it to people. I'm thinking to myself, that's a lot of waste. And you know what? Chinese people will not ride water rides without ponchos. If you go to Shanghai Disney too, it's like everyone, like there's thousands of riders an hour on the Rabbits ride, and
it's
they're
like,
all
well, what's
wearing
the
ponchos.
point? Like it defeats the purpose. Like, especially when you have one that gets you so unnecessarily wet as the one at Colorful Yunnan Paradise, where it's like, you know, you could just turn the cannons off.
I just want to wear it just to minimize
and then
my
also
wetness.
and then not do the poncho, and like everyone would be fine.
I will say we did try it pretty quick.
Yeah.
And it was a great ride to take photos of. It was a good ride. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it until I got super, super soaked. And I was like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, why would you do this? Like,
but it was like, when is it going to end?
It was relentlessly endless.
The whole area was probably my favorite of the areas of the park. Obviously, the wing coaster area was cool.
Oh my God.
Remember the
bathrooms?
We have
to talk about the restrooms.
With the sink?
Yes. Oh my God. These were the prettiest. This park had really nice restrooms. Like,
really nice
maybe
bathrooms.
I should start putting like,
beautiful.
Oh my God, we should do like a restroom meter.
These were like Shanghai Disney level bathroom
then your
experience.
Park is good. You know, like park's quality is defined by how good its restrooms are.
Yeah.
These restrooms, like the nicest restrooms of any Chinese park I've ever been to. Yeah, I feel like they were honestly even better than Shanghai Disney, because Shanghai Disney is a little bit sterile because they're just like mass capacity, Disney restrooms. But these were super well themed. So inside, it's really pretty and pretty well manicured. And then when you get to the shared sink area, which is between the males and females restrooms, there is a faucet where the water leaks out of a tiger's mouth through like over a rock into the sink like basin.
A mosaic stone base on the vanity, and it's like facing the midway. So like when you're walking up to the bathroom, like it's front and center. Like they're very proud of this flourish, and they want you to see it, whether you're washing your hands or you're on the midway, whatever. But yeah, you turn the sink on and the water like jettisons out of the mouth of this. There were different animals. There was probably an elephant one too, and maybe I don't know, but it was like this beautiful stone, like real stone mosaic. And I was just standing there and I'm like washing my hands, just like admiring this sink that I'm using. Not the most practical sink for anything other than washing your hands, because there isn't really a faucet. It just comes straight out of the wall. But like, just a really great little detail.
We have a video of this. I can't recall. We should post it.
Yeah, we will. That was one of the last things we did before we left. I was like, oh, let's take a video of the sink.
Yeah, because we went back to that same restroom on the way out, just because we wanted to go to that same restroom again.
Yeah, this was the only restroom that had that. The other restrooms in the park were nice, but none of them had the cool sink.
They were that nice, yeah. And then we rode Wing Coaster. Gorgeously themed. So the area, which again is themed to like the higher mountain regions with the flags and whatnot, kind of like the Everesty, Tibetan kind of theme to it, except for it is in the Yunnan province. They call it like Beautiful Snow Kingdom or something, or
Cold Kingdom, I think.
Cold Kingdom.
Beautiful.
So it's a beautifully themed area with these like icy rooftops, and then the ride itself, you enter. There's a circular plaza with these columns, and on them they have these eagles. And it's beautifully themed, like really beautiful. And then all the flags to the center of the plaza. And then you walk through it. And then as you walk towards the queue of the ride, there's all these mountain goats and cows on these rock formations with ice on them. And it's hard to describe, but the amount of detail for this was shocking. I mean, may I even say the most detailed approach of any wing coaster in the world. Yeah. Because we've been the vast majority of them at this point. And I could not understate how impressive it was. And they had this rock score. It's like ancient music rock score.
It was
like the hype was crazy. It was like I couldn't believe.
Yeah, the vibes were immaculate.
I couldn't believe it.
Everything.
Oh my God! I'm sure there's a video of it somewhere that we have where the music is in there.
Yeah.
We'll post it. And oh my God, I couldn't believe.
It got me so
The overall vibe was insane. I mean, it was like that. That was probably my favorite theme park music I have ever heard, and it was just
the best.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, it was so good. And they have this giant wind coaster, it's actually quite a large one. And the layout is not super conventional because it does mostly just really broad stroke things. And in the end, it has kind of like a really tight little section. Um,
It
and
is
then
a
there's
really nice layout. It feels like a really nice, exaggerated, like expanded X-Flight type layout. It just does a little bit more. Unlike X-Flight, it's got like the big camelback hump with the floater air after the first drop. And like the 0G roll or the super slow roll is like a slightly parabolic roll over the entrance plaza that does more of like a gatekeeper thing. So it's like an X-Flight meets gatekeeper kind of moment, but like really well themed, but in some great
and
forces.
there's these two mountains and that are in the background of the first drop that are of course rock formations, and really those mountains are the wings of a giant eagle. So this is like the third coaster with giant rock formation of creatures that the ride is themed to, and it looks so good. I mean, I cannot describe this ride is just phenomenal. I think one of the highlights of our travels around the world is because it was a whole package. It was
We rode
a
it 4
phenomenal
times.
layout. It was a good wind coaster. It ran well. Definitely ran kind of like one of the classic ones. Had a bit of a bump on it. It wasn't like Swarm smooth because Swarm is somehow the smoothest freaking wing in the world. I don't know what they're doing at Thorpe, but anyway,
Swarm is very sturdy.
I had that whole like thematic aesthetic that was so pretty. And
Even the
then
gift
of
shop
course
was
the
really
musical
cute. It was a
score.
stationery
Yeah,
store, and you could buy rubber stamps themed to the park and
because the park had like
notebooks.
a
And
passport thing going, right? So you could buy like a little passport and you get stamps from different things and areas in the park. But before we move on, I want to just discuss the layout a little bit. So like Alex said, you know, mentioned kind of like that it's a combination kind of X-Flight and Gatekeeper in a way. So first you have your lift hill, and I need to look up the height real quick of how tall it is, but you
I'll look it
start with
up.
your lift hill, and then you have your your dive drop where you turn upside down and you drop. And then you have a giant airtime hill, which actually has good airtime. Oh my god! In the front row, you
Airtime.
are flying over that hill, followed by an Immelman, and that is followed by a 0G roll, like a normal 0G roll, pretty tall, standing. They have a turnaround right where the bird is, like the Bird Mountain rock formation, and then you have the really super slow roll that is kind of parabolic over the entrance. That is followed by a turnaround into a corkscrew, a very tight little corkscrew at the end, almost like
Those
it's
last
like
two
everything is.
elements really are the cherry on top.
Yeah, I almost feel like you have this giant, broad, stroke approach to the whole ride, and then you pass some trees, and then there's a little hidden section that you can't even see from
Yeah.
anywhere but on the ride.
Yeah, everything's just like woo, woo, and
Like everything is like really massive, but all of a sudden at the end, it's like this little squiggle of like high speed turn, corkscrew, turns.
that
It's like wow,
helix before the corkscrew comes so close to the ground, and you're on the left
yeah,
wing.
it's great.
Suddenly, it's like you are diving into the grass, and you come so close. It is so tight, and then the forces coming into the corkscrew reminded me a lot of Phoenix at Toverland, because the sustained force of exiting the slow roll, 0G roll, and then into the helix, and then into the corkscrew. By the time you finally pull out of the corkscrew into the brake run, you're just like like worn
I
out.
can't remember, was that team left or team right on that?
You liked
We rode left
we
first,
didn't
right?
agree. I liked the left side better because you take the top side of the drop when you wing over, and that was we rode 4 times, and we rode left side up front, left side in the back, and then we rode right side up front, right side in the back. And you expected to like the left side better, and you ended up liking the right side better. And I will say the right side was better than I was expecting.
Did I like
But
the right side better because it has the outward swing on the turnaround, like on that big turnaround?
it's just the
Yeah.
quality of a great wing coaster when both sides have something to offer, and both sides
Yeah, I feel like
highlight
so often
different parts of the ride.
on the wing coaster, you have where one side's like obviously the better side.
Yeah.
But yeah, this coaster, it was really hard. I think I kind of flip flops between which one I like better.
Yeah.
But overall,
But
great
just a
park.
great ride.
Actually, a park I would go back to if I find myself in Yunnan province, just to kind of maybe get some more rides on the coasters, because it really is a spectacular park. I think a lot of Chinese parks, once they're built, and they don't add a lot of new stuff. So I don't know when they're going to build, if they're going to build anything new. But because again, there's the Crown Plaza. It's a really high quality resort in this resort area. Park is very polished and manicured and well taken care of. Let me just put it this way: parks in China that are 7 years old don't generally look nearly as great as this park does. This park just feels
No
like
way.
it's beautifully maintained. Vibes are immaculate. So yeah, I would actually go back to this park. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the most colorful parks I've ever been to in China. And then I guess we'll finish this episode with the city park in Kunming, which
Yeah.
is home to amusement rides.
Yeah. So on our first day, we always go to the city park, like whatever city that we're in China, like going to the city park is just kind of like the obvious thing to do. And we were walking through the park, Dagwon Park is what it's called. And we saw rides in the background. We saw mostly a big Ferris wheel. And we're like, oh, we should walk around in there. The rides weren't open. They had we weren't sure if they were like closed, or if they just closed for the day. But we got to walk around the park, even though the rides were closed, because it's part of the city park and it's just free to enter. And then we did a little research and found out that the park does open and operates. It just, closes at like 5 or whatever. And we were like, oh, if we have time, like we should do this. Like we should hit this place up and see if we can nag some sneaky creds. They have 2 coasters, a little like roller skater-esque family coaster that was actually surprisingly good. And then a 4-loop coaster, two vertical loops, 2 corkscrews, just a like kind of an aerodynamics type of like kind of knockoff type coaster. And that one we weren't even sure if they would let us. We weren't sure if they would let us on any of these because like Chinese manufactured standard coasters have a tendency to have pretty low height and weight.
Yeah, the amount of credits we were denied around the country because of these Chinese coasters that were just way too big, tall, and heavy for. Yeah.
But then so we went to the park the next day, and at first we were kind of confused about how it even worked because like there's no lines for any of the rides, and we didn't even see ticket booths anywhere. But like we kind of went up the entrance to the kiddie coaster, wandered up there, and the ride operator's like chilling in his booth, like waiting for customers. Then he pops up and hops over the track and lets us into the queue. And we were like, are we allowed to ride this? He's like, yeah, of course. And I guess it's one of those things where like, even though we were above
first
the weight,
he pointed at a QR code. And right. I remember seeing a number. There was like a Chinese entrance sign, right? And there was like a little like descriptional sign, all in Mandarin. And I remember seeing the number. I forgot what it was, what number I saw. I think I saw 30. So then I was like, all right, the 30 makes no sense for like any measures, like metric measures for us to be able to ride. So I was like, it's probably the price. So they get up to this platform, and sure enough, like I scan the QR code and I type in 60 for us to ride, and he's like, yeah, no, very good. So like then we realized that just like most things in modern China, you use Alipay to get on. So you scan the QR code, pop in the price that it costs for both of you to ride, and then once you get this little jingle, we just confirming that we paid.
Yeah.
We sat down and rode, and even though I think according to the restriction sign, we were definitely like too big, but
we were definitely too tall and too heavy to ride the kiddie coaster, and they did not care.
Because
the brand new kiddie coaster looked great.
Product line from Jinma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so we wrote a similar product line in Nanjing at Dragon Valley that was same, I think, restrictions. We just tried anyway, and they just let us ride.
Oh, yeah,
it's very roomy, comfortable. Yeah. They're like some of the best kiddie coasters. Like, and kitchen out, the modern day Jinma stuff is good. Like, tracks like a dream, comfortable, wide, big trains. Yeah, it was a good ass kiddie ride. Yeah.
And then after that, we were like, well, we got lucky with this kiddie coaster. Let's try the looping coaster. And sure enough, we walk up. And the ride operator is there, and he lets us on.
He's kind of laughing. He's like, "Oh, you're riding this?" And we're like,
he was tickled that we were there and even doing that. And we got front row because no one else was riding. And at first, it seems like it would be kind of sketchy. And it's this manufacturer that we're not super familiar with. And you pull the harnesses down, and the harnesses are hydraulic, which was like.
But here's the weird thing: they look like these super old aero trains, like typical. Red, white, blue color scheme. They look kind of jank. They have stickers on them that say made in China everywhere, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we were so unfamiliar with this. And sorry. And so we were so super unfamiliar with this. And so of course our mind is kind of racing because we've written some really old Chinese manufactured stuff where it just simply doesn't run very well. And we didn't see a train dispatch. I haven't seen anything happen. We're just on this roller coaster. and we're just gonna make it seem happen. But then when you pulled out the restraints, it immediately changed my mindset a bit. I was like, okay, so these are hydraulic restraints. Like, it felt strangely high quality despite not looking high quality, like. And then when we dispatched, the first turn was very smooth. And the lift hill we're over here discussing, well, either we're going to absolutely hate our lives, so we're going to be in so much pain coming down this drop and whatnot. But also, the first turn was like suspiciously smooth. Like, it tracked so well getting onto the lift. I was like, how is that even possible?
And it was a quiet lift hill, too. We were having like a whole conversation on the lift hill, like talking about what to expect. And like,
I need to look up what the ride's manufacturer is.
The ride, it's Haifei. I've got it right here. Haibei Zhongyi Meteorological Equipment Manufacturing Company Limited.
Yeah, so we didn't know what the hell to expect from that, So then we get to the top of the list, and we're both kind of nervous. We're like, "Oh man, this can go either way." Like, I was honestly kind of like shitting bricks because I just didn't know what to expect. Like, first of all, I'm kind of folded into this little train, even though the trains are hydraulic. I'm still very tall for Chinese standards, and these trains aren't very big. So we're all kind of folded in there together in the front row. And we're like, "Oh man, this can go really wrong. We can be in a lot of pain." I don't know what to expect. And so we roll out the lift, and the first drop is bonkers. I mean, like, intense stuff. We go down that drop, and then, it's a really smooth drop. But then the first two vertical loops are the only two vertical loops. Very intense. I mean, like, I thought
the positive G's into the loops
but, oh
were
my
crazy.
God. I
felt
thought I was
like
my head was going to explode.
Smashed.
So, like, after the first loop, I was scared because I was like, oh my God, this is so intense. Like, I'm scared for the second loop. It all happens, obviously, in like a few seconds' time. And then you blow through the second loop. Again, very intense. And you feel like your face is planting into the inversion. And then after that, you have your turnaround around the station. Just like a classic aero, loop double cork. Now there's two loops and then double cork. It's super smooth. And transition into the corkscrews, super, super smooth. I mean, I couldn't believe it. This is one of the smoothest loopers I've ever ridden. Smoother than most Vekomos and Arrows.
When we pulled out of the corkscrew and we were doing the last turn into the brake run, we looked at each other and we're like, wow,
what?
That was really
How was
good.
It that smooth? How was it possible? Yeah. So that was definitely a highlight.
It was a huge surprise, and it was so satisfying.
And then we
ride
some
such
photos
a
of the ride,
rare, obscure coaster.
Which we didn't even take our camera. We just wanted a video or two of the ride. So, but it took us like 45 minutes to convince people passing by to go ride.
Oh yeah,
because
we were like begging
it's so good.
other
we
people
just
to ride,
just
so that we could take pictures of the train.
So eventually, this party of like these like younger adults come by, like in their 20s, and they're like looking at the ride. And we're like, "Oh, you should ride. It's so good. We just rode. It's so good." And they're like, "No, we're scared.
It's too scary."
And then like we're like, "No, you should ride." And eventually, they're kind of lingering around this little store. And then eventually I see them go to the queue. We're like, yes. It's like, it took us almost like an hour. And then we both filmed from different angles. And then we put the videos together to make a reel.
You made a great reel out of our two videos. And you would think that it was two different dispatches at least, if not three or four. But it's like, that is one train.
Making this video happen. But we were all really clever.
Train that we got, except for the one that we were
both
on.
of us were running from like 2 points. So we both had like discuss where we're going to stand for like part 1 the video, part 2 the video. And then like there was going to be a transition point where we would run to our next video spot when the train was running by. It works out really well. Like the video turned out good.
Yeah.
So anyway, good times and Kunming, good rides, good roller coasters.
Bonus credits. We also got one more credit in front of our hotel in Kunming.
Oh, that's right.
The little chicken coaster, which that one was, that takes the cake for our most off the grid credit because like, we tried to look for it on Coaster Count. It wasn't even there. It wasn't on Roller Coaster Database. It was nothing. It was one of these little Turkish chicken coop coasters that are getting super popular around China. And they're just popping up so quick. So many little shopping malls and amusement parks and things are building these little coasters. In fact, it was the third time that we had seen one, but it was the first time that we had the gall to actually ride one. And I'm glad we did because they're very comfortable seats, very spacious. There's no lap bar or anything. It's just like a seatbelt. And they send you around like 20 times.
It took
like
really long
to ride it. And it was very satisfying to ride it and then, email Coaster Count and Roller Coaster Database and be like, we wrote this new coaster. Can you add it so that we can add it
I guess this this episode is turning a little bit longer than I expected, but we did just discuss like 4/5 Chinese parks / destinations.
Like 4.5 parks. We talked a lot about the Ningbo parks too, in reference to the
So definitely make
Xiamen
sure you check
parks.
out the episode that is that's episode 2 of this season, which they really do have, I think, the coolest dark ride. Maybe it's one of the coolest dark rides in the entire world, and they have a Vekoma Top Gun launch coaster, so that's definitely worth checking out. Make sure you listen to that. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, preferably Spotify. Give us 5 stars. Pocket Cast if you're listening there, or anywhere else. We do really appreciate you tuning in. We also have started our biggest series yet, which is the Great British Road Trip, and we've already published the Alton Towers and the Paulton Spark and Drayton Manor episodes. We got Thorpe Park episode coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. Lots to talk about European coasters, and eventually we're going to throw a bunch of America to the mix, but we haven't gotten there yet. And so season 6 is in full swing, lots to listen to, and we'll catch you guys next week. Bye.